I wasn't supposed to be home that early. It was one of those rare days where the universe hands you a break. A canceled meeting. A project finished ahead of schedule. I was supposed to clock out at the usual time, come home, maybe crack a beer, and relax for once. But instead, I found myself driving back 2 hours early, thinking I'd surprise my wife, Anna. Maybe we could actually have a decent evening together for once. I parked in the driveway and noticed something odd right away. The blinds were half drawn, and her car was parked at an angle, like she'd been in a hurry. Still, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she had a rough day. Maybe she was just distracted. Either way, I figured walking through the door early with a smile would be a nice surprise. I didn't even have my keys in the lock for a second before I heard it. Laughter. Light, playful. But not her laugh. It was someone else. A man. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second, I thought maybe I was hearing things. But the laughter came again, clearer this time, and I froze. I pushed open the door quietly, stepping inside the house. It was eerily still except for that sound, his voice, and then hers murmuring something I couldn't quite make out. I took a deep breath and moved down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. The door to our bedroom was ajar, just enough for me to see a shadow moving inside. I could hear the faint sound of water dripping, the shower, and then I saw them. There he was, some guy, bare-chested, towel wrapped around his waist, wet hair dripping down his face like he owned the place. And there she was, standing right in front of him, her hands resting on his chest, like this was the most normal thing in the world. She leaned in, and before I could process what I was seeing, their lips met in a kiss. I froze, my mind going blank for a second. The kind of blank where your whole world stops and nothing makes sense anymore. But then, like a switch flipping, it all came crashing back in. Anger, betrayal, disgust. I felt my stomach turn as the reality of what was happening hit me. I stepped into the room, my voice low but full of venom. What the hell is going on here? Anna jerked back, her eyes going wide as she saw me standing there. The color drained from her face, and she stammered, "Ryan, I didn't think. You didn't think I'd come home early?" I snapped, cutting her off. My eyes flicked to the guy who was standing there like an idiot, frozen in place. "Who the F***ck are you?" The guy didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The guilt was written all over his face. He looked like he wanted to disappear, but he couldn't move, like a deer caught in headlights. Anna stepped between us, her hands trembling. "Ryan, please, it's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. You're standing here, kissing some stranger while he's fresh out of our shower, and you want to tell me it's not what I think?" She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. There was nothing she could say to explain this away. No excuse. No apology. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I took a step forward, my fists clenching at my sides. I wasn't sure if I was going to punch the guy or break something in the room, but the rage bubbling up inside me was dangerously close to boiling over. "You've got 5 seconds to get out of my house," I said to him, my voice low and steady. 5. And if you're still here after that, I'm going to make sure you regret ever stepping foot in this place. The guy didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his clothes, didn't even bother putting them on, and bolted for the door like his life depended on it. I watched him go, my fists still shaking with anger, but I knew he wasn't the one I was really angry at. It was Anna. I turned to face her, and she looked like she was about to break down. Good. She deserved to feel every bit of the guilt and shame she had brought into this house. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around like she was trying to come up with a lie, but I wasn't having it. "Tell me the truth, Anna. How long?" "A few weeks," she whispered, barely able to meet my eyes. I felt my chest tighten, the betrayal hitting me like a punch to the gut. Weeks. She had been doing this for weeks, while I was going to work, trusting her, coming home like everything was normal. The thought of it made me sick. "You disgust me," I spat, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. "In my house? In our bed? You think I wouldn't find out? You thought you could keep this secret forever?" Ryan, I'm sorry, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. A mistake. I laughed, shaking my head. A mistake is forgetting to take the trash out. This is a choice. You chose this. You chose to betray me. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the realization that there was no coming back from this. She had ruined everything, and now she was standing there, broken, knowing that nothing she said could fix what she had done. I turned away from her, not able to look at her anymore. Pack your things and get out, I said, my voice cold. I don't care where you go. Just get the hell out of my life. She tried to protest, but I wasn't listening. I didn't care about her excuses, her apologies. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. I walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what had happened sink in. My marriage was over. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about the person I had trusted, had been shattered in an instant. But at least now I knew the truth. I stormed out of the house, my mind racing with 100 different thoughts, none of them good. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest like I had just run a marathon. But the thing that scared me most wasn't the rage. It was the numbness creeping in beneath it. I stood on the front porch, staring out at the street, trying to breathe, trying to think. But no matter how hard I tried, all I could see was her kissing him. The way she looked at him, like I didn't even exist. I took out my phone and called Mark, my best friend since high school. He was the only person I trusted right now, the only one who wouldn't try to sugarcoat things or make me feel better. I didn't need comfort. I needed the truth. Ryan? What's up, man? Mark's voice came through the phone, casual, like it was just another day. I need you to come over, I said, my voice tight. Now. There was a pause on the other end. Mark knew me well enough to sense when something was off. What's going on? Just come, I muttered, hanging up before he could ask any more questions. I couldn't explain it over the phone. I didn't want to. I leaned against the porch railing, staring down at the ground, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. My life had just imploded in a matter of minutes, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. 15 minutes later, Mark pulled up in his beat-up truck. He got out, took one look at my face, and knew something was seriously wrong. He didn't ask any questions, just walked up the steps and stood next to me, waiting for me to speak. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of the moment. I came home early, I said quietly. 2 hours early. Mark frowned, clearly not understanding. Okay. And I caught her. I spat, the anger flaring up again. In the house, with some guy, fresh out of the shower. Mark's face hardened, and I could see his fists clenching. Are you F***ing kidding me? No, I muttered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I wish I was. He let out a slow breath, like he was trying to contain his own rage. Where is she? Inside, I said, nodding toward the house. I told her to pack her **T and leave. Mark shook his head, running a hand over his face. Damn, man, I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say, I replied, my voice hollow. It's over. Mark didn't argue. He just stood there with me, silent, as we both stared at the house that had once been my home. Now it felt like nothing more than a tomb, full of broken promises and lies. After a few minutes, the door opened, and Anna stepped out, a small suitcase in her hand. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked at me like she wanted to say something, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I'm sorry, Ryan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. I just turned away, not wanting to see her face, not wanting to hear another word come out of her mouth. She had said enough. She hesitated for a moment, standing there like she was waiting for something, an apology, forgiveness, I don't know. But when I didn't say anything, she finally walked past me, her footsteps heavy on the porch as she made her way to her car. Mark watched her go, his jaw clenched tight. She's lucky you didn't do worse. I let out a harsh laugh. Trust me, I wanted to. Who was the guy? Mark asked, his voice low. I don't know. Some random idiot. Didn't even get his name. Good. He's not worth it, Mark muttered. Neither is she. I nodded, knowing he was right. But that didn't make it hurt any less. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at Mark's place, crashing on his couch while I tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I couldn't stay in that house, not after what had happened there. Every corner, every piece of furniture, felt like it was tainted by her betrayal. I thought about selling it, just getting rid of the place entirely, starting over somewhere else, far away from the memories. But selling a house wasn't exactly something you did overnight, and I wasn't ready to face that yet. I wasn't ready to face anything. Mark tried to keep me distracted. We went out to the bar a few nights, watched some terrible action movies, did anything to keep me from spiraling. But the reality of it all kept creeping back in. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. Every time I walked into that house, it felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it. It wasn't just the cheating that hurt. It was the fact that she had taken something from me. Something I couldn't get back. She had destroyed my trust, my sense of security, my belief that the person I loved was someone I could count on. And now, all I had left were the pieces of what used to be my life, scattered at my feet. One night, after a few too many drinks, I finally broke. I grabbed my phone and texted her. Something I hadn't done since the day I caught her. I need answers. She responded almost immediately, like she had been waiting for this. Anna, I'll talk, but not over text. Can we meet? I stared at the screen, my hand shaking. Part of me didn't want to face her again, didn't want to sit down and hear her excuses. But another part of me, the part that still couldn't make sense of any of this, needed closure. I needed to know why she did it, why she threw away everything we had. Fine. Tomorrow. The next day, we met at a coffee shop on the edge of town. Neutral ground, somewhere public where I wouldn't lose it, where she wouldn't try to pull any stunts. I sat at a table near the back, waiting for her to show up, my stomach twisted into knots. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked different, tired, like the weight of what she had done had finally caught up to her. She sat down across from me, her eyes searching mine, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of meeting her gaze. What do you want to know? She asked, her voice small. All of it, I said bluntly. How long? Why? Who the hell is this guy? She hesitated, like she wasn't sure where to start. It started about a month ago. I met him at the gym. We just clicked. Clicked. I spat, the word tasting foul in my mouth. Is that what we're calling it now? She flinched, but I didn't care. I wasn't here to make her feel better. I never meant for it to go this far, she continued, her voice trembling. It just happened. I wasn't thinking, Ryan. I wasn't. Stop, I said, my voice cold. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. Why him? Why now? She bit her lip, her hands shaking in her lap. I don't know, she whispered. I just felt lost, like we weren't connecting anymore. And when I met him, I don't know, it felt exciting, like something I was missing. Missing, I repeated, my voice rising. So what, I wasn't enough for you? You had to go find excitement somewhere else. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. It wasn't about you, Ryan. It was me. I was searching for something, but I know now it was a mistake. I've been trying to figure out how to make it right, but there's no making it right. I cut in, my voice harsh. You destroyed us. Anna sat there, tears streaming down her face, but it didn't matter anymore. Her apologies, her regret, it all felt hollow. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. You don't get to play the victim here, I said, my voice low but seething with anger. You think I don't feel lost sometimes? You think life's easy for me? But you don't see me running off and screwing around behind your back. She flinched at my words, and for a second, I saw a flash of guilt in her eyes. Good. She should feel guilty. She should feel every ounce of the pain she had caused me. I know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know I messed up, Ryan. I know I destroyed everything, but I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated, my voice rising. You were bringing him into our house, kissing him while I was out there working my ass off. What did you think would happen when I found out? That I'd just be okay with it? She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. You just wanted excitement. I cut in, my voice sharp. You wanted to feel alive again, right? Isn't that what this is about? You were bored with me, so you went looking for something new. She didn't respond, and that silence was all the confirmation I needed. She didn't deny it because she knew it was true. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a bitter laugh. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. You got your excitement. And now, you've lost everything. Anna wiped at her eyes, sniffling, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy for her. I didn't care about her tears. All I cared about was the truth, and I had finally gotten it. Is there anything left to say? I asked, my voice cold. Or are we done here? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. Ryan, please, I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to counseling, I'll quit my job, I'll cut off contact with him, whatever it takes. I just want us to work. I shook my head, laughing bitterly again. You think counseling is going to fix this? You think quitting your job is going to make me forget what you did? Her lip trembled, and she looked like she was on the verge of breaking down completely. But it didn't matter. No amount of pleading or promises would undo what she had done. The damage was too deep. I can't trust you anymore, I said finally, my voice calm but final. I'll never be able to look at you the same way again. Every time I look at you, all I'll see is you with him. There's no coming back from that. She opened her mouth to protest, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table to cover my coffee. We're done, Anna, I said, my voice steady. I'll get a lawyer and we'll figure out the divorce. You can keep the house for all I care. It's just a reminder of your betrayal anyway. She stared at me, her eyes wide, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ryan, please. No, I said firmly. It's over. With that, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her behind once and for all. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks, the anger, the betrayal, it didn't disappear, but it felt lighter. I had gotten my answers, and now I could finally move on. The next few weeks were rough, but I threw myself into work, trying to keep my mind off everything that had happened. Mark was there for me like he always was, but even he knew that some things couldn't be fixed with a few beers and a couple of nights out. The divorce process was quick, mostly because I didn't want anything from her. I didn't want the house, the furniture, or any of the memories that came with them. I just wanted out. I wanted to be free of her and everything she represented. Anna tried to reach out a few more times, texts, calls, even emails, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She had said everything she needed to say, and I had heard enough. She was a part of my past now, and that's where I intended to keep her. One night, about a month after the divorce was finalized, Mark and I went out for drinks. It was the first time in a while that I felt like I could actually relax, like I wasn't carrying the weight of everything on my shoulders. As we sat at the bar, sipping our beers, Mark glanced over at me. You doing better? I shrugged. As good as I can be, I guess. It's over, and that's all that matters. He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. You know, the town's been buzzing with rumors about what happened. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of rumors? People know about the divorce, about what she did, he said. Word gets around. Small town and all that. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. Guess it was only a matter of time. Yeah, Mark said, smirking. But you know what? She's the one who has to live with it now. Everyone knows what she did. She's the one who's gonna have to face the whispers and the side eye every time she steps out of her house. That thought gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. It wasn't revenge, not exactly, but it was justice. The world knew who she really was, and she couldn't hide from it anymore. Good, I muttered, raising my glass. Let her deal with that. Mark clinked his beer against mine, grinning. To moving on. To moving on, I repeated, taking a long drink. In the end, I didn't get the closure I thought I wanted. But maybe that was the point. Maybe closure wasn't about getting all the answers or making sense of the betrayal. Maybe it was just about accepting that some people will hurt you, and some things will never be the same again. But that didn't mean I was broken. That didn't mean my life was over. It just meant it was time for a new chapter. The days started blending together after that, but in a good way. I was moving forward, finding a rhythm again. The emptiness that Anna had left behind wasn't as consuming anymore. It was still there, like a scar that hadn't fully healed, but I wasn't letting it define me. Work kept me busy, and Mark made sure I didn't fall into any dark holes. We'd hit the bar a few nights a week, joke around, talk about anything other than Anna. It was the distraction I needed. Slowly, the anger and hurt began to fade, replaced by something like indifference. She didn't matter anymore. Not to me. Not to my future. Then one day, Mark hit me with some news that changed everything. We were grabbing a drink after work when he casually dropped it, like it wasn't going to turn my world upside down. Hey, you know Anna's seeing someone, right? I stopped mid-sip, the beer halfway to my lips. What? Yeah, he said, shrugging. Some guy from out of town. They've been hanging out for a few weeks. Word is, they've been all over each other. I set the beer down, feeling the old familiar burn of anger rise in my chest. Who is he? Mark shook his head. Some random dude. I don't think he knows anything about what happened with you two. Probably thinks he's struck gold. I clenched my fists, trying to control the rage bubbling up inside me. I didn't care that we were done. Didn't care that the divorce was final. It still felt like a slap in the face, knowing that she had moved on so quickly. Like what we had meant nothing. Don't get worked up over it, Mark said, sensing where my head was at. She's not your problem anymore, man. Let her screw up someone else's life. He was right, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. The idea of her parading around with some new guy, acting like nothing had happened, made me sick. It was like she had erased our entire history, like I was just another name on her list of mistakes. I'm not worked up, I muttered, though I could feel the tension in my body. It just pisses me off that she gets to walk away like nothing happened. She doesn't, Mark said firmly. Trust me, people in town know. They're not forgetting what she did anytime soon. That gave me some small sense of satisfaction, knowing that her reputation had been ruined by her own actions. But it still felt like she was getting off easy. While I had spent months picking up the pieces of my life, she was out there, moving on without a second thought. A few days later, I ran into her. I hadn't seen her in person since the coffee shop, hadn't heard her voice since the day I caught her. But there she was, standing in line at the grocery store, laughing with the guy Mark had mentioned. My stomach twisted as I watched them. The way she leaned into him, the way he touched her shoulder like he had every right to, like she hadn't destroyed everything we had built together. I stood there, frozen, the rage bubbling up inside me again. I didn't know what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to walk up and confront her or just turn around and leave. But something in me wouldn't let me walk away. She saw me before I could make a decision. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a second, the laughter died on her lips. I could see the guilt flash across her face, just for a moment, before she quickly looked away, pretending like she hadn't seen me at all. It was like a knife to the gut. I turned and walked out of the store before I did something I'd regret. The anger, the hurt, it all came flooding back in an instant, like no time had passed at all. All the progress I thought I'd made, all the healing, it felt like it had been ripped away in that one moment. That night I called Mark, needing to vent. I saw her, I said as soon as he picked up. Who? He asked, but I knew he already knew. Anna? I spat, pacing the floor of my apartment. At the store. With that guy. Mark let out a sigh. Man, I'm sorry. That sucks. It's like she doesn't even care, I said, the anger rising again. Like none of it meant anything. She's just moved on, laughing, smiling, like she didn't tear my life apart. Yeah, well, "She's a piece of work," Mark muttered. "You know that, but don't let her drag you back into that mess. You're better off without her." "I know," I said, though the words didn't make me feel any better. We talked for a while longer, but even after I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal all over again. It wasn't just the cheating that had destroyed me. It was the fact that she had moved on so quickly, like I was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience in her life. I spent the next few days trying to avoid her, trying to pretend like she didn't exist. But in a small town like ours, it wasn't easy. Everywhere I went, there were reminders of her. Places we had been together, people who knew us, whispers of the scandal that had rocked our marriage. And then, one day, I ran into her again. This time, I couldn't walk away. It was at a local bar, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. I had gone there with Mark, hoping to unwind, but the second I stepped inside, I saw her. She was sitting at a table in the corner with the same guy, laughing, drinking, completely oblivious to the damage she had caused. Something inside me snapped. Without thinking, I walked straight toward her. I could feel Mark behind me, trying to catch up, but I didn't stop. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. I just needed to confront her, to make her face what she had done. She saw me coming, her eyes widening in shock. Her new guy turned to look at me, confusion written all over his face. But I wasn't here for him. I was here for her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Ryan, not here," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Yes, here," I snapped, my voice rising. "You think you can just walk around this town like nothing happened? Like you didn't destroy everything we had?" Her new guy stood up, trying to intervene, but I shot him a look that made him sit back down. "This isn't about you, buddy. Sit down." Anna stood up, her face pale. "Ryan, please, not now." "You don't get to decide when, Anna," I growled. "You had your chance to be honest. Now you have to face the consequences." By now, the entire bar was watching. I could hear people whispering, could feel the eyes on us, but I didn't care. Let them see. Let them hear the truth. "You think you can just move on like this?" I continued, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you can play the victim, tell everyone you're the one who's hurt? You're a liar, Anna. And everyone in this room should know what kind of person you really are." Her face was bright red now, and I could see the shame in her eyes. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. "I hope you're happy with him," I spat, nodding toward her new guy. "Because you're sure as hell not getting any more of my time." I turned on my heel, walking away before she could say another word. Mark was right behind me, shaking his head, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. As we stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, and for the first time, I felt like I had finally gotten the closure I needed. I didn't care about Anna anymore. I didn't care what she did or who she was with. I was free. Walking out of that bar felt like lifting 100-pound weight off my chest. I'd finally said what I needed to say, made Anna face what she had done in front of everyone. There was no hiding anymore, no pretending like she hadn't torn apart everything we had. Mark and I walked in silence for a few minutes, the cool night air wrapping around us. He hadn't said a word since we left the bar, and I could tell he was holding back. Finally, after a few blocks, he turned to me. "You feel better now?" I nodded, though the feeling wasn't quite as satisfying as I thought it would be. "Yeah, I think so. I needed to do that." Mark shoved his hands into his pockets, glancing over at me. "You sure you're not just feeding the fire? I mean, blowing up like that, it's not going to fix what happened." "I know," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "But I needed her to know she didn't get away with it. I needed her to feel some of what I've been feeling." Mark didn't argue. He understood, even if he didn't fully agree. That's the thing about best friends, they don't always have to approve of your decisions, but they stick by you anyway. We stopped at the corner of the street, the faint sounds of the bar still echoing behind us. I let out a long breath, my hands finally unclenching. For months, I had been carrying this anger, this need to get even, and now that it was out there, I realized just how exhausting it had been. "Where to now?" Mark asked, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged. Home, I guess. Don't feel much like staying out anymore. Yeah, probably for the best, he said, giving me a pat on the back. Let's get you out of here before someone decides to stir up more drama. We headed back to my apartment, and as soon as I walked through the door, the weight of the night hit me. I felt drained emotionally and physically, like I had just gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing the fight. I crashed on the couch, staring up at the ceiling, letting the silence settle in around me. Mark grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge and joined me, neither of us saying much. There wasn't anything left to say. I had said it all back at the bar, loud and clear. And now it was time to move forward. The next few weeks were different, lighter. I had finally broken free of the anger that had been chaining me down, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't constantly thinking about Anna, about what she had done, about how she had ruined our marriage. She was in the past now, and that's where she belonged. Work was steady, and I threw myself into it even more, using it as a way to keep my mind focused. Mark and I hung out regularly, but we didn't talk about Anna anymore. That chapter was closed, and we both knew it. Instead, we talked about the future, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go from here. One night, we were sitting at the bar again, the same one where I had confronted her. But this time, the energy was different. I felt relaxed, at peace, like the worst was behind me. You ever think about leaving town? Mark asked, taking a sip of his beer. I raised an eyebrow. Why would I leave? He shrugged. I don't know. Just seems like maybe this place is full of too many memories for you. Maybe getting out of here would help. I considered it for a moment, swirling the beer in my glass. He had a point. This town was full of reminders of the life I used to have, of the future that had been ripped away. But at the same time, it was home. I had roots here, friends, people who knew me, who had my back. Starting over somewhere else sounded tempting, but it also felt unnecessary. I've thought about it, I admitted, but I don't think running away is the answer. I'm not gonna let her chase me out of my own life. Mark smiled, raising his glass. Fair enough. Can't argue with that. We clinked glasses and spent the rest of the night talking about everything but Anna, laughing and joking like we used to before all the chaos. Felt good. Felt normal. And normal was something I hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I got a call from a mutual friend of mine and Anna's, someone who hadn't taken sides during the whole mess but had stayed neutral. At first, I thought maybe they were reaching out to check on me, to see how I was holding up. But the second I answered the phone, I knew something was off. Hey, Ryan, they said, their voice hesitant. There's something you should know. I leaned back in my chair, frowning. What is it? It's Anna, they said quietly. She's leaving town. For good. I blinked, processing the words. What? Why? They don't want to make it a big deal, but from what I've heard, she can't handle it here anymore. People keep talking about what happened, and I guess it's been too much for her. She's been avoiding everyone, and now she's planning to move. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt relieved. The other part didn't feel anything at all. I just thought you'd want to know, they continued, sounding awkward. I'm not sure where she's going, but it sounds like she's not planning on coming back. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice flat. I appreciate it. We hung up, and I sat there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. Anna was leaving town. The thought didn't spark any emotion in me. Not happiness, not sadness, not anger. Just nothing. She was gone. For good. And I realized that was exactly how I wanted it. In the weeks that followed, I started focusing more on myself. I picked up a few new hobbies, started getting back into things I hadn't done since before the whole mess with Anna. It was like I was rediscovering who I was, rebuilding the parts of myself that had been chipped away over the years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. One evening, as the sun was setting and the town was quiet, I found myself sitting on my porch, looking out at the street. I thought about everything that had happened, about the day I came home early from work and saw Anna with that guy, about the months of anger and betrayal that followed, about the confrontation in the bar and how it had finally set me free. I wasn't the same person I had been back then. I had been broken, torn apart by someone I loved. But I had survived it. I had come out the other side, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had in store for me. And as I sat there, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into the horizon, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. The weeks turned into months, and I found myself adjusting to a new normal. Anna was gone, really gone this time, and life felt quieter. Not just in the sense that she wasn't around anymore, but in a way that made me feel like I finally had some peace. The drama, the anger, the constant churn of emotions. It had all settled, and for the first time in a long while, I could breathe. People in town still talked about her from time to time. You can't live in a place this small and have a scandal like that without becoming a permanent part of the gossip mill. But it didn't bother me anymore. I didn't flinch when someone mentioned her name, and I didn't care about the whispers. It was old news now, a story that had played out, and I had moved on. One day, as I sat at the local diner sipping coffee, I realized just how far I'd come. I wasn't the same man who had walked in on his wife kissing another man fresh out of the shower. That guy had been lost, broken, blindsided by betrayal. But the man sitting here now, he was different. He had taken the hit and kept moving. He wasn't defined by the pain anymore. Mark slid into the booth across from me, snapping me out of my thoughts. "What's with the serious face?" he asked, grinning as he picked up a menu. "You look like you're solving world problems over here." "Just thinking," I replied, taking a sip of coffee. "About everything. How it's all behind me now." Mark raised an eyebrow, glancing over the top of the menu. "Yeah? You finally letting go?" I nodded. "I think I have. It's weird, but it doesn't feel like it's even part of my life anymore. It's like it happened to someone else." He smiled, setting the menu down. "That's how you know you've moved on, man. You're not stuck in it anymore." "I guess so," I said, smiling back. "Feels good, though. Feels like I can actually live again." Mark ordered a coffee, and we spent the next hour talking about everything except the past. For the first time in what felt like forever, the conversation wasn't about Anna, wasn't about what had happened, wasn't about the fallout. It was just two friends, laughing and enjoying the simple act of catching up. When we left the diner, I felt lighter than I had in years. Life kept moving, as it always does, and I found myself diving deeper into the things that made me happy. I started working out more, picking up hobbies that had fallen by the wayside during the mess with Anna. I even started thinking about traveling, going places I'd never had the time to visit before. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone to fill the void that Anna had left. That void wasn't there anymore. I had filled it myself with my own passions, my own purpose. I had learned that relying on someone else to make you happy was a recipe for disaster. I had to be happy on my own first. One afternoon, I found myself at the park, running laps around the trail like I had been doing for the past few months. It had become my way of clearing my head, a way to focus on the present and leave the past behind. As I rounded the corner, I saw a familiar face sitting on a bench, watching her kids play on the jungle gym. It was Jenny, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd gone to school together, and after graduation, our paths had diverged. She'd gotten married, had kids, settled down. I hadn't seen her much since then, but she looked the same, just a little more tired, a little more worn by life's responsibilities. I stopped running and walked over, waving as I approached. "Jenny." She looked up, surprised to see me. "Ryan. Wow, it's been forever. How are you?" "I'm good," I said, smiling. "How about you? How are things with the family?" She shrugged, a small smile on her face. "Busy, as you can imagine. 2 kids, a full-time job, and a husband who's always working. It's a lot." I nodded, sitting down on the bench beside her. "Yeah, I can imagine. But you're doing good." She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yeah, I guess. It's been hard lately, but we're getting by." I glanced over at her, noticing the tired look in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged just a little. "You sure you're okay?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Honestly? No. Things have been rough. My husband, well, he's not around much, and when he is, it's like he's not even there. I've been trying to keep it together for the kids, but some days, it's hard. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't exactly the expert on relationships, considering my own marriage had imploded in spectacular fashion. But I understood what it felt like to be in a relationship where things weren't right, where the person you loved wasn't really there. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I know how that feels. She smiled sadly. Yeah, I heard about what happened with you and Anna. I'm really sorry, Ryan. No one deserves that. It's in the past now, I replied, shrugging. I'm over it. Took a while, but I'm in a better place. That's good to hear, she said, her smile a little more genuine this time. You always were strong, Ryan. I'm glad you came out of it okay. We sat there for a while, talking about old times, about the people we used to know, the lives we used to live. It was strange, seeing how much had changed, how different our paths had turned out. But it was also comforting, knowing that some things, like friendship, could withstand the test of time. When I finally got up to leave, she hugged me, holding on a little longer than I expected. Take care of yourself, Ryan, she said softly. You deserve to be happy. You too, Jenny, I replied, smiling. Don't forget that. As I walked away, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was ready for something more. Something beyond the anger, beyond the betrayal, beyond the past. Maybe I was ready to open myself up to the possibility of happiness again. The days kept rolling by, and life continued to surprise me. I didn't chase after anything. I let things come to me, and slowly, piece by piece, I started rebuilding a life that was mine. A life where I wasn't defined by what had happened, but by what I chose to do next. One night, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I realized just how far I had come. The man who had walked in on his wife kissing another man was a distant memory now. I had grown from that moment, learned from it, and come out stronger. The future wasn't certain. It never is. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't running from the past, and I wasn't holding on to the anger. I was ready to see what came next. Things were different now. Life had this calm rhythm to it, like the storm had finally passed, and I was standing in the middle of a quiet field, finally at peace. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. I was just living. I wasn't chasing anything anymore, neither success nor revenge. I was content with where I was. After my conversation with Jenny at the park, I started thinking more about what I wanted from life. For so long, everything had been about survival, about getting through the days without letting the weight of the past drag me down. But now that the weight was gone, I found myself wondering, what's next? I started going out more, meeting new people, and slowly but surely, I let myself open up to the idea of moving forward in ways I hadn't considered before. I wasn't looking for anything serious, not yet, but I wasn't closing myself off either. One Friday night, Mark convinced me to come to a friend's party. It wasn't really my scene. I'd never been big on parties, but he insisted it'd be good for me to get out of my comfort zone. Trust me, man, he said, grinning as we pulled up to the house. You need this. You've been stuck in work and home mode for too long. I rolled my eyes but followed him inside. The place was packed, people spilling out into the backyard, music thumping from the speakers. It was a far cry from the quiet evenings I had grown used to, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. We grabbed a couple of beers and made our way through the crowd. Mark disappeared to talk to someone he knew, leaving me standing by the kitchen, sipping my drink and surveying the scene. I wasn't expecting anything, just trying to blend in, enjoy the night for what it was. That's when I saw her. She was standing by the window, laughing at something one of her friends had said. There was something about her that caught my attention. Something different. She didn't look like she belonged at a party like this either. Like she was just here because her friends had dragged her along. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to walk over. Maybe it was the few beers I'd had, or maybe I was finally ready to stop hiding behind my past. Either way, I wasn't going to stand in the corner all night. Hey, I said, casually leaning against the wall beside her. Not much of a party person either? She glanced over at me, surprised, but smiled. Is it that obvious? I shrugged, grinning. A little, but I'm in the same boat. She laughed softly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Yeah, my friends dragged me here. Thought it'd be good for me. Same, I said, taking a sip of my drink. I think they mean well, but I'd rather be somewhere quieter. She nodded, looking out the window. Yeah, me too. We started talking, and before I knew it, the party faded into the background. Her name was Sophie, and she was easy to talk to, like we had known each other for years. We shared stories, laughed at the ridiculousness of the party, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying any baggage with me. It was just nice. As the night wore on, we ended up outside, sitting on the porch steps, talking about life. I found myself telling her things I hadn't planned on sharing. About the divorce, about how I'd struggled to move on, about how I'd finally found peace. She listened, really listened, and when I finished, she didn't offer empty words of comfort or try to fix anything. She just smiled softly and said, I get it. Takes time to rebuild. It wasn't a big statement, but it meant a lot to me. She understood. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just got it. As the party started to wind down, we exchanged numbers, and I left with a strange sense of hope. I wasn't rushing into anything, but for the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was ready to let someone else in. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I started spending more time together. We'd meet for coffee, take walks in the park, talk about everything and nothing. It was simple, easy. There were no expectations, no pressure. And that was exactly what I needed. Mark, of course, was thrilled. He'd been pushing me to get out there again, and now that he couldn't help but gloat a little. Told you, he said one night over drinks. You just needed to meet someone new. Sophie seems cool. She is, I admitted, smiling. But it's not serious. I'm not jumping into anything. Smart move, he said, nodding. But it's good to see you happy, man. You deserve it. Thanks, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure where things with Sophie were going, but I was okay with that. For now, it was enough to just be moving forward. One afternoon, Sophie and I were sitting on a park bench, watching the ducks in the pond. It had become one of our favorite spots. Quiet, peaceful. The perfect place to talk or just enjoy each other's company. She glanced over at me, a curious smile on her face. You ever think about what's next for you? Like, long term? I leaned back, considering the question. Yeah, I do. I've thought about moving, starting fresh somewhere new. But I don't know. Part of me feels like I'm just getting settled here. Sophie nodded, her eyes thoughtful. Makes sense. You've been through a lot. It's okay to take your time. I'm trying, I said with a chuckle. But it's hard to shake the feeling that I should be doing more. You know? I get it, she said softly. But don't rush it. You've come a long way. Sometimes it's okay to just be. I smiled, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. She was right. I had been so focused on what came next, on rebuilding, that I hadn't stopped to appreciate how far I'd come. Maybe it was time to do that. As we sat there, watching the sun dip lower in the sky, I realized something. I didn't need to have all the answers right now. I didn't need to know exactly where my life was headed. For the first time, I was okay with the uncertainty. I was okay with the idea that life didn't need to be perfect to be good. And with Sophie by my side, I felt like I was finally ready to embrace whatever came next. The next few months were some of the best I'd had in a long time. I wasn't rushing into anything with Sophie, but we were spending more and more time together, and it felt natural, like it was meant to be. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder at the past. I was living in the present, and it felt good. Life had settled into a peaceful routine. Work, spending time with friends, and exploring new things with Sophie. The best part was that there was no pressure, no expectation of where things were going. We were just enjoying each other's company, and that was enough for both of us. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, something we'd done almost every weekend since we started dating. Sophie looked over at me with a serious expression. "Ryan," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about us." I turned to face her, feeling a small flicker of nervousness in my chest. "What about us?" She smiled, reaching for my hand. "I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I want you to know that I'm here for the long haul. I don't need things to move fast, but I want you to know that I'm committed to you whenever you're ready." Her words hit me like a gentle wave, and for a moment, I just sat there, taking it all in. The old version of me, the one who had been broken by Anna, would have panicked at the thought of commitment, at the idea of trusting someone again. But this version of me, the one who had survived, who had healed, he was ready. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I appreciate that, Sophie. I'm not going anywhere either. I just needed time to figure things out. But I think I'm ready for more." Her face lit up with a smile, and in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I wasn't afraid of getting hurt, of trusting someone again. Sophie wasn't Anna, and I wasn't the same person I was back then. I had grown. I had learned. We sat there, watching the sky change colors as the sun dipped below the horizon. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Life had a way of knocking you down, but it also had a way of building you back up, stronger than you were before. A few weeks later, something happened that I hadn't expected. I was at the grocery store, picking up a few things, when I saw her, Anna. She was standing by the deli counter, looking down at her phone, completely unaware that I was there. For a moment, I froze. It was the first time I'd seen her since she'd left town, and all the memories of that day, of walking in on her with that guy, flashed through my mind. But something was different this time. I didn't feel the anger. I didn't feel the pain. I didn't feel anything at all. She looked up and saw me, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she made her way over, her expression uncertain. "Ryan," she said quietly, stopping a few feet away from me. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Same," I said, my voice calm, steady. There was an awkward silence between us, and I could tell she wasn't sure what to say. It had been so long and so much had changed. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice soft. "For everything. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I'm really sorry for what I did to you." I nodded, acknowledging her apology, but it didn't affect me the way it once would have. "I appreciate that, Anna, but we're past that now. It's over." She nodded, her eyes flickering with something that looked like regret. "Yeah, I know. I wanted you to know that I've changed. I've been working on myself, and I'm trying to be better." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as someone who was trying to rebuild her own life. We were both different now, both on our own paths. "I'm glad to hear that," I said genuinely. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She smiled weakly, nodding. "Thanks, Ryan. I hope you're happy too." "I am," I replied, feeling a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. "I really am." With that, she turned and walked away, and I stood there for a moment, watching her go. It was strange, seeing her again after all this time, but it didn't feel like the end of anything. It felt like the final page of a chapter that had already been closed. That night, as I sat with Sophie on the porch, I told her about running into Anna. "How did it feel?" she asked, her voice soft. I shrugged, smiling. "Honestly, it didn't feel like much of anything. I think I finally let it all go." Sophie smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "That's good. You deserve peace, Ryan." "I think I've found it," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. We sat there in silence for a while, watching the stars come out, the night settling around us like a warm blanket. I wasn't thinking about the past anymore. I wasn't worried about what had happened or what could happen. I was just here, and that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Sophie and I grew closer, and I found myself embracing the future with open arms. The anger, the betrayal, it was all part of my story, but it didn't define me anymore. It had shaped me, sure, but I had written my own ending. I wasn't afraid of getting hurt again, because I knew now that I could survive it. I had survived the worst and I had come out stronger. And as I looked toward the future, I realized that it wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, growing from it, and moving forward with the people who mattered most. Sophie took my hand, and I smiled at her, knowing that whatever came next, I was ready, because I was free. Time moved on, and so did I. It had been over a year since the day I came home early and found Anna with that guy, and looking back on it now, it almost felt like another lifetime. The person I was back then, the anger, the pain, it was hard to recognize him anymore. Sophie and I had grown even closer, and what started as something casual had slowly turned into something real, something solid. There was no rush, no pressure to define what we were or where we were headed. It just worked. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying to fix something or hold it together. I was happy, truly happy. One night, as we were sitting on the porch again, our usual spot, I found myself thinking about how much had changed. I turned to Sophie, who was leaning against me, her eyes closed, just enjoying the quiet evening. "You know," I said, my voice soft, "I don't think I ever really thanked you." She opened her eyes, looking up at me with a curious smile. "Thanked me? For what?" "For being there," I said simply. "For helping me get through everything without even knowing you were doing it." She smiled, shaking her head. "You did that yourself, Ryan. I was just here for the ride." I laughed softly, but I knew she was wrong. She had been the light I didn't know I needed, the peace I had been chasing for so long. "Well, either way," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, "I'm grateful. You helped me see that life can be good again." Sophie's smile widened, and she leaned up to kiss me gently. "You deserve it, Ryan. You've been through enough." And just like that, everything felt complete. As the months continued to pass, I finally felt like I was living life on my own terms again. I wasn't haunted by the past anymore. I had made peace with what had happened, and more importantly, I had made peace with myself. I had come to terms with the fact that sometimes things fall apart. Sometimes people hurt you, but that doesn't mean you can't rebuild. Mark, of course, was thrilled to see me thriving. He'd been there through all the ups and downs, and now that I was in a good place, he couldn't help but gloat a little. "I knew you'd get through it," he said one night as we sat at the bar. "Took you long enough, but I always knew you'd come out stronger." I smirked, raising my glass. Yeah, you don't get to take credit for this one." Mark laughed, clinking his glass against mine. "Maybe not, but I was right there with you, man. You've come a long way." He wasn't wrong. I had come a long way. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. There was still so much ahead of me, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about it. One day, out of the blue, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Anna. I hadn't heard from her since that brief encounter at the grocery store, and honestly, I hadn't expected to. We had both moved on, gone our separate ways. So seeing her name on the envelope was a surprise. I opened it, curious but not anxious. Inside was a short note, written in her familiar handwriting. "Ryan, I know it's been a while, and I don't want to stir anything up, but I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I just wanted to say again how sorry I am for the way I hurt you. I know I can't undo what I did, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you've found peace. I've been working on myself, and I've finally started to forgive myself for the mistakes I made. I hope you can too. Wishing you all the best. Anna." I sat there for a moment, reading the note over again. There was no anger, no bitterness, just acceptance. She had made her peace with what she had done, and in a strange way, it felt like the final piece of closure I didn't even know I needed. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer. It didn't need a response. There was nothing left to say. As life continued to move forward, I found myself embracing every moment with a newfound sense of gratitude. The pain of the past was just that, the past. It didn't define me anymore. It didn't control me. I had built something new, something better, and I wasn't going to let anything take that away. Sophie and I grew closer with each passing day, and while we didn't talk much about the future, we both knew that we were building something real, something lasting. It wasn't rushed, and it wasn't forced. It just was. And that was all we needed. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, our favorite way to end the day, I realized just how much my life had changed since that fateful day when I came home early from work. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a story that had happened to someone else. I looked over at Sophie, who was sipping her tea and watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. She caught me staring and smiled. "What's on your mind?" "Just thinking," I said, grinning, "about how far we've come." She raised an eyebrow, playfully nudging me with her elbow. "We? Or you?" I laughed, leaning back in my chair. "Okay, maybe me. But I wouldn't have gotten here without you." She smiled, setting her tea down. "You would have. You just needed time." I didn't argue with her. Maybe she was right. Maybe I would have found my way eventually. But the truth was, I was glad I hadn't had to do it alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the last rays of light over the quiet town, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It was all behind me now. And for the first time, I was excited about the future. Because I had finally learned that life isn't about the people who hurt you. It's about the people who help you heal. And with Sophie by my side, I knew that whatever came next, I was ready.